Hi there, in this video I'm going to show you some tips on how you can boost participation in the verbal roundtable. Sometimes, especially the first few times around, it might be a little quiet, especially as your students are getting used to the flow of tapping in, becoming the speaker, being added to the queue. But not to worry, there's lots of ways that you can get students more comfortable and add a little bit more structure so that you get everyone speaking up. So first off, it's really helpful to start with a written roundtable. Parlay's kind of been designed so that you start with a written roundtable first, but of course you don't have to. What's really valuable about running a written discussion first is that you can have your students review the content or resources alone, on their own, take their own time, and really think about the discussion questions first. And of course, they could start to write their own ideas before actually sharing them out loud. Another thing is that you can have students be anonymous to each other in the written roundtable, so they're given secret identities. So as they might be becoming more familiar with this topic, or maybe even sharing their ideas if they're really shy, having the anonymity on allows them to be a little bit more open, give feedback to each other, and just gain a little bit of a better foundation of this topic before we go into a little bit of a higher stakes verbal discussion, again, especially for those quieter students. And lastly, one really great tip about running a written roundtable first is you could actually start with a written roundtable and then click Start Verbal Roundtable, and it's going to automatically invite everyone from this written discussion to a verbal discussion. And so that will just make it a little bit more seamless. And of course, students can always go back and see their ideas in the written discussion, but they might even want to put some of those ideas on their notepad as they prepare for the verbal discussion. Next, set class goals and expectations. So this will make it a little bit more clear and encourage the class to work together towards particular goals. You can kind of co-create class goals and have students brainstorm what we should be working towards as a class, and you could write them up on the board or maybe post them somewhere online. You could even put them in the discussion prompt itself in the instructions section. But here are some examples of some class-wide goals that are commonly set. So first, you might want to set a goal of a participation rate, or maybe even say, we want everyone to speak up at least once. You might want to encourage particular tap-in types. If you've got lots of divergent ideas and new ideas that come up in a discussion, you might want to encourage the building on and the challenging to connect ideas. Or if you have a quieter class, you might want to encourage questioning and having students come up with their own questions to prompt other students' thinking and really get towards that student-driven dialogue. Another one, since students are going to be having their devices in front of them, you might want to remind them and set a goal to make eye contact with everyone around the room and try to avoid becoming distracted or staring at the screen the whole time. And so by setting the goal of eye contact, sometimes our students need reminders for that. In terms of individual goals, you can have students set these up on their own, or take some time before class to think about them. So one might be, I want to speak up at least blank times, or I want to respond to somebody or build on an idea at least twice. Another one is you might want to encourage students to reward each other using the high five button blank amount of times, maybe 3 or 4. And then lastly, if you have some quieter students who really need peer encouragement, you might want to really encourage your students to encourage others using that ear icon underneath the names to encourage, 3 others to speak up at different points in the discussion. Again, you can reference these goals at the end. You might want to even have one student be tracking these goals and kind of assessing the class on how you do as a class, and have them report at the end in your reflection to say, did we meet these goals and how can we kind of achieve those next time? Next is you probably want to have students take a few minutes to type some notes before the discussion starts. So when students log into the discussion, they'll be in the prompt category where they'll see the instructions, see any content or articles, and see the guiding questions. And so they could actually start to type their notes here on their notepad, and then once the discussion starts, they'll have that to reference. You can have students do this the night before or simply in the first 5-10 minutes of class in order to have them prepare and maybe even just write down what they'd want to say out loud. Some of the quieter students can benefit from just reading from their notepad the first few times that they speak up. Of course, as a teacher, you could always see these notes by simply clicking the student's name and then scrolling down to student notes down here. Once you start the discussion, it could be helpful to start with a low stakes prompt and ask everyone in the class to tap in with a new idea so that we quickly hear from everyone. So for example, you might start off by saying, what was your favorite character in the novel, in this particular chapter? And so everyone's going to tap in with a new idea, and really quickly we'll add everyone to the queue. We'll hear from all the different characters, just one word answers, get everyone to kind of break that ice, get familiar with tapping in and tapping out and adding to the queue. And then once we get through that first low stakes question, then we can dive into one that's a little bit more substantive. If this is your first time running a verbal roundtable, you might even want to have a look at the easy discussion prompts and icebreakers collection in the Parlay universe. This is going to have a lot of really great low stakes topics that are kind of fun. Of course, they're not necessarily curriculum related, but they're a good way to prompt discussion, get students talking on topics that are interesting for them. As the discussion is going on, you might want to pause and reflect. So stop the discussion, have students look at their actual data, and then think about how they are meeting the class goals, and think about individually, do they want to be speaking up a little bit more, or do they want to be encouraging others more and leaving some space for other people in the discussion? When you're actually in your discussion, you can always click stop. This is going to pause all of the data. It's going to tap everyone out, and we will be able to start it again, and it will just simply add to the data we had before. So again, you can pause this at the end of one class or even partway through class and then start it again. And last but not least, as the discussion is happening, nudging quiet students is a really great way to provide individual feedback to students, encouraging them or having them think about a particular thing without pausing the class and announcing it to the whole class. So inside of your roundtable, it's going to look something like this. So you could just see the student's name in the list, click the three dots and click nudge. You can write any message that you'd like. You can send it to them. And on the student screen, they're going to see that blue nudge come through with the text that you've written. And of course, they can exit out of it and go and tap in on their own. And last but not least, I must mention that probably one of the best ways to have students engage in that metacognition and think about their own participation individually and as a class community is to review the summary data at the end of every discussion or even at the beginning of next discussion. So of course, that's always in the summary tab. You can review the participation rates, how long each student spent as the speaker. We could see the types of contributions, so really getting at all of those different discussion skills. And then lastly, we could see the participation summary for each student. So as a class, if we really want to be working on challenges, then we'd probably want to see across the class, okay, who's challenging the most? Okay, Alice and Oliver and Jordan. Maybe we could look to them for some guidance on how to respectfully challenge others. And for all of these data visualizations that are here, we do have little questions that you can engage the class in at the end in a class reflection. So, was there any type of contribution that was more common than others? Do you think it's important for us to try and find a better balance between the contribution types and why? So just get students taking a little bit more ownership and reflecting on their experience and what a great discussion really does look like. All right, that's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you have any suggestions, please get in touch with us and let us know how you boost participation in your verbal roundtables. But best of luck, have fun, and stay curious.